Devon is one of the 1% population. He possesses an inhuman train that allows him to recover quicker than the average human. Got his biceps tear, and a week later he's back arm wrestling on the table.
Bicep and hand. The hand's all ripped apart too, but it'd be better. Yeah.
Back then in 2022, when Levin tore Devon's biceps, it is probably the muscle belly of the biceps because of the blood. As the blood is affected by gravity, it will flow down and might eventually even reach his hand, causing it to be blue as well. If the tendon tears partially, you will not see this amount of blood, as tendons tend to have poor blood supply compared to muscles. He once tore his TFCC ligament and is still doing 70 kilos plus pronation lift. He does PR every 20 minutes multiple times a day, abuses his right arm and gets ripped open for several hours. His MRI showed the most damaged hand ever. Dislocated joints, hypercalcified bones, arthritis, and pinched nerves. Despite all of that, he still takes super matches and trains as if his life is on the edge. Devon is the biggest fan of blood flow. Tendons need mechanical loading to heal. They won't heal up unused. You need to place some load on those joints to get blood flow going, and potentially the loading is literally what forces the tissue to uptake, synthesize collagen. Getting ripped open under load is a sure way to get as sore as possible. That eccentric opening while firing max strength is a lot of damage. It takes a while to recover from a lot of damage. A natural guy needs to listen to his body and back off when things are more painful than enjoyable. Tendons and ligaments are much more dense tissue than muscles, so they need much more time to recover fully. There's a common case when muscles outrun tendons and ligaments in terms of strength, and it may cause some injuries. So be careful and patient building your arm wrestling skill. The temptation is really strong because it's a fun sport, but try to make practice more structured. Just like you don't go into the gym and bench you 1 RM every session, you shouldn't max out on practice every week. If you're feeling super beat up, you're probably going too hard too often. Practice is practice, not competition. Antagonist muscle training is a great idea that I find helpful personally, especially when done with high reps. Isometrics and eventually eccentrics are the best tendon and ligament recovery exercises to pair with rest. For muscles, literally just rest. If they're constantly achy, it means you're overdoing it. High reps heal the tendons faster. It's called tendon perfusion, where movement helps blood perfuse into the tendons. Cold therapy reduces gains in the long run. For immediate relief recovery, it can work just like anything that reduces inflammation, but inflammation partly signals the body to repair. You're dulling the stimulus. Isometrics and slow negatives are good for tendon structure and help to repair pathologically damaged tendons. They are good for healthy tendons too, but you can't add them on top of a high-resistance training load. You have to reduce your normal workouts to accommodate adding in isometrics and slow eccentrics. Otherwise, you'll just be doing more damage to an already overworked tendon. Devon is the biggest fan of blood flow. He does hundreds of reps with elastic bands just to nourish the connective tissue with nutrients and oxygen. Resistance bands have been proven to improve the strength, size, and function of muscles. For those undergoing rehabilitation, bands can provide very light or heavy resistance, which can be used in targeted ways for specific muscles, also protecting joints. One major difference is that it involves a lower amount of force on the joints, which means that more stimulus can be provided to the muscles with less chance of injury. This is also good news for anyone with existing injuries or joint pain, because resistance bands may allow you to continue working out and performing exercises that you can't with dumbbells. Devon considers table time as the main factor to get stronger at arm wrestling, so all of this training is homework. One major difference between free weights and resistance bands is the variable resistance applied through the full range of motion of an exercise. With free weights, there are actually parts of the movement when the muscles aren't performing much work due to lack of gravity, such as at the top of a bicep curl. He works out his riser, pronation, and supination after every heavy practice. For heavyweight lifting, the muscle is receiving greater resistance at its strongest point in the range of motion and therefore is receiving more adequate resistance to better stimulate strength adaptations. Devon travels a lot. They won't weigh down his luggage but will still give him an effective full-arm workout. For this same reason, they're ideal for arm wrestlers and competitors who need to warm up their muscles prior to a competition. Tendons are made up of collagen. The primary building blocks of collagen are glycine, proline, and lysine. Vitamin C is the catalyst needed to act upon those amino acids to produce collagen. Look up Pauling therapy. It's life-changing. In one of Devon's videos, it is said that his thumb no longer has arthritis. The issue is that his thumb never had arthritis to begin with. It was around the scaphoid and lunate. It's also important to note that ultrasound is useful in assessing ligaments and muscles, but they are not sensitive at detecting arthritis. Ultrasound cannot penetrate past a certain depth, so there will inevitably be blind spots. It's not implausible for a false negative to occur. Devon's primary wrist injury from last year's MRI was his complete TFCC tear. His TFCC tear is located in the central disc portion where the ultrasound cannot see, so there's no way they could have assessed whether it healed or not. My takeaway from his own words is that we learn pretty much nothing about where it matters. It's possible and arguably probable that his wrist is legitimately in better shape, but we have yet to see hard evidence on that. I really hope he goes back to the radiologist who first did the MRI. The central disc Devon's tear is the deepest in the wrist where region ultrasound cannot penetrate. It's the fact that the blood flow mechanism for tendons and ligaments depends on movement. Tendons have a trick pumping mechanism that yields higher blood flow rate when the tendon is sliding across its range of motion. Healing depends on blood flow. Tendon blood flow depends on movement. Therefore, tendon healing depends on movement. If you've ever been to a physical therapist or rehab for an injury, you will realize that his workouts are not much different than what a therapist would have you do. He's very versatile, and his greatest strength is probably his hand, which is a huge part of arm wrestling strength, but not a huge percentage of your arm size or body size. Also, there's guys that are much bigger than him, but not many. Devon has a bigger frame than most and isn't trailing too much in weight from others. The reality is most people who take steroids aren't doing it very scientifically, and they have a hard time balancing between letting their muscles outgrow their tendon, ligament growth rates, and eventually, if you mismatch enough, something comes apart. Bodybuilders literally put their lives at risk by pushing the drug's physical mass to the limit of what their body can tolerate. Lastly, arm wrestling is weird. If the top guys get bigger, they're probably getting a bit stronger too, but it's deceiving to base it all on body size. That specific arm wrestling strength, technique, tendons, whatever, has led to someone like John Brzenk being the #1 guy in the world. And Devon, too, wasn't that big back when he was #1. We've kind of moved past that now to the point where the best guy in the world will likely be over 320 pounds and on max juice.